I
whatever.
thought that the strength, it's interesting that you don't mention it. The strength of the play was the Merlin Arthur relationship. And it's interesting that when you get outside of that relationship, Merlin appears like a loon, but when he's with Arthur, he distills wisdom at times. One time, Arthur says that I killed a frog today,
Mm,
and it goes on about, and Merlin teaches him that you have to be very selective in killing and in your thoughts.
mm,
To err from something means that you have the ability to distinguish between actions. And that's something that I thought was very interesting. And he has a dozen moments like that too. It's also interesting how he doesn't want to refer Arthur to refer to him as his master or his father, but he'll refer to Arthur in the master tones. Um, I think too that the relationship where Arthur, there's one scene where Arthur eventually breaks out of that and he does call Merlin father. It's a very emotional, powerful scene between them. But I think that that's the strength of this play over everything else is that relationship.
yeah. Well, that's one of the things I wanted to establish. I wanted to also establish that since we know Arthur appears out of nowhere, and there's an important reason why we don't know Arthur's past is it's more mythic. It's like in the Great Western Shane. Where does Shane come from? Shane comes down from the mountains into the valley, and after at the end of that movie, Shane is shot, but he rides up into the mountains as if he's ascending into heaven. Well, Arthur is the once and future king of Britain, so Arthur is going to. We don't know where he's from now. These two women, these two young women, claim that they're his sister, but we don't know if that's true. They look like him. They have red hair. Their stories seem to mesh up, but I don't know if I'm going to play on that, or maybe I'll leave that up to the viewer, or to the watcher, the audience, and so there's a lot of these things that are best left to the imagination. But one of the things I did steal from Tom's play, although I think I had used it in some of my earlier plays, but not to the degree Tom did in his last play, was the Bergman-like, where the character's talking straight to the audience in a spotlight, and then they turn around and we'll find that they're really talking to someone else. I do that with Morgause when she first meets Arthur. She's talking, she's just a red-haired woman, and then she talks, and it turns out she's actually talking to Arthur. And I thought that was a good technique, and I used that a few times in this play. I used it in the play I'm writing right now. It sets up a personal connection, very much like Bergman does in Persona and some of his other films of the 50s and 60s, where you have the characters directly speaking into the camera, so to speak, but the audience is really a surrogate for a character that later appears when the spotlight pulls back to a fully lighted stage.
Okay, I had never even noticed that. That was it was an interesting summary of how you use that.
Well, yeah,
Um,
and like I said, I did it once or twice, I think, in some early plays, consistently, uh, 3 or 4 times in major scenes. Tom did it in his last play, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to steal that." So,
I thought that it was also interesting how you use Stevens and Tennyson,
uh,
and you used it with the scenes with Fire Hair too. You have all these interesting names for the bookkeeper, the monster, Fire
well,
Hair, the young woman.
and
Um,
and these are characters from other plays but I couldn't use their real
the only,
names. So,
the
like
only the only one who gets an
Zip,
actual name is Zip.
yeah,
Um,
which means zero.
yes, but speak a little bit about that and your use of Tennyson and Stevens in this. You use it as an epigraph, Stevens epigraph too for the play.
Well, the Stevens epigraph is where the title comes from, Destiny Unperplexed, and it's from Esthétique du Mal, part 13. And well, the epigraph for the whole play is, it may be that one life is a punishment for another, as the son's life for the father's, but that concerns the secondary characters. It is a fragmentary tragedy within the universal whole. The son and the father alike, uh, and equally are spent, each one by the necessity of being himself. And that really, I think, is a great epigraph for the play, because we get both the sense of the de facto father and de facto son, and they're linked together, but they're also individuals apart. The Tennyson one is that I think comes at the end here, right?
Mhm.
I forget because Merlin is ill and being sent off, and I forget how I use it actually. The Tennyson one is more natural within the flow of the play, but the Stevens is the one that's more defining. Let's see, Merlin. And all of a sudden, these words came to me. Oh no, that's the epigraph I just quoted. So he's quoting the epigraph. I don't even know where the hell I put Tennyson here, but um, the Tennyson one is not quite as important, but it does in its own way uh, highlight one of the whatever scene it appears in. And people will always be, how do you not know your own plays? Well, I've written so goddamn much, and I'm constantly thinking about it. And like I said, I practice forgettance at the end of each book or work that I do, so that while I'll have subconscious connections between them, I'm not actively aping it. So that when I'm doing this Gawain play, it's connected to this first play with Merlin and Arthur, but it's not overly reliant. When I do the Guinevere play, it won't be overly reliant on the Gawain and the Arthur plays. So that's why I actively forget. But when I'm on it, I'm focused, and that's why it works. But I forget it. So here's Gawain, and we do have a scene with Gawain here. We have Gawain, which is good. And one of the things that is really good is that I have references to all of these things that are going on. Like here we have Sir Gawain before he goes off on Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and I set up his brothers because Modred, we know Modred, at least in this version, isn't really related to Gawain and his brothers because Morgause never slept with King Lot. But Arthur waits until King Lot has died to send Morgause there to claim that she was the unknown wife who was sent away by King Lot. And so Arthur, in that sense, we see him manipulating. He's taking over another kingdom that he has already control of, and he's putting a puppet ruler, his sister there, or his presumed sister and his presumed nephew. So we see that Arthur, in his ascent to become king, is manipulative, and Merlin. If we look at Merlin as a positive influence, perhaps, we see that Arthur has no problem going away from Merlin's teachings, which again, in and of itself, is pretty interesting, I think.